Welcome to The Orbit. I'm Valtuem, and I talk all things sci-fi and fantasy. The final scene of Avengers Endgame makes no sense. Cap travels to the past to return the Infinity Stones to their proper places in time. But instead of returning the way they expected, they find an old man Cap sitting on a nearby bench, having lived out his life with Peggy. What is going on here exactly? And is this possible? We need to understand how Endgame's time travel works. The movie establishes two hard rules about time travel. First, Smart Hulk explains.
Changing the past doesn't change the future. If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
It's kind of confusing, likely deliberately so for the sake of comedy. What we can definitively glean from this is that any changes done to the past will have no impact on the present/future. Cap could go to 2012 and shoot his past self in the face, and the future wouldn't change. It's just not exactly clear how the established timeline is maintained. Like, does changing the past make an alternate timeline? Well, no, because the Ancient One says,
"The Infinity Stones create what you experience as the flow of time. Remove one of the stones, and that flow splits. In this new branch reality, without our chief weapon against the forces of darkness, our world would be overrun."
The only way to create a branch timeline is to remove an Infinity Stone from the universe. A lot of people, myself included, got this wrong at the time. If Cap killed his past self, that would not create an alternate timeline, because it has nothing to do with the Infinity Stones. So what does all that mean for this scene? Cap travels to the past to return the stones, but he doesn't return, instead living out his life with Peggy starting in the 40s. Then, in 2023, he shows up as Joe Biden. Is this Cap from another timeline? Nope. He returned the stones, so no new timelines were made. Also, he didn't return via time machine, so even if he were in another timeline, he still can't be here. Is he from the main MCU timeline? Has he been here all along? Nope. Future Cap's present and the past would intrinsically change the timeline, and changing the past doesn't change the future. But that begs the question, if changing the past doesn't change the future, what happens if someone goes to the past and just stays there? Loki's escape in 2012 proves you can alter the events of the past, but the movie insists this doesn't result in an altered present. How does that work? Are events sort of reset by the universe? When Cap returns the Time and Mind Stones to 2012 and leaves, do all the changes in that time period instantly revert back to how events originally transpired? But again, Cap stayed in the past, which means he created constant changes to the timeline from 1948 to the present. How do events reset if a time traveler continues to interfere just by existing? Perhaps this can all be cleared up by the creators of Endgame. Surely they understand how this scene works, right?
So if you go to the past, the only thing you can do is create an alternate future, right? That's what Cap does, is there's an alternate future that happens. So he would live out that life with Peggy in an alternate future, and he would have to then get back to this timeline to hand off that shield.
It was our thought that Steve lived in his own timeline and always married Peggy, and those kids you see in Winter Soldier are his kids.
Well, fuck. The writers and directors of Endgame can't even agree on how this scene is possible, and both explanations leave something to be desired. As I said, the Russo's explanation doesn't work, because Cap couldn't have come from a different timeline. I suppose Marcus and McFeely's explanation has less issues, but there's still that nagging question. How can a time traveler continue to change the past that cannot change the future? The only way I can think to resolve this is if we assume, at some point, all of Cap's changes get undone by reality. Everything he did, along with everyone's memories, revert back to a version of events that don't include him. When this happens, though, is totally unclear. Perhaps as soon as Cap reaches the moment he originally left? This works, although it completely discounts the writer's belief that Peggy's kids belong to Cap. They can't. If he had children with Peggy, the universe would erase them to preserve the timeline. Which is kind of horrifying to think about. So, is that it? Did we solve Endgame's final scene? Does it actually make sense?
Surprise, motherfucker! No! Wait!
All of this becomes a million times more confusing when we bring Loki into the picture. It's got a completely different interpretation of how time travel works in the MCU. According to that show, changing the past, even without removing an Infinity Stone, does create a branch timeline. It also says there's an ultra-powerful organization outside of time that destroys any branch timeline that sprouts off the main one. Loki gives the Russo's explanation more credibility, and the writer's explanation less, which isn't actually helpful. Given these retcon rules, Cap must come from another timeline. right? Nope. Firstly, he still doesn't have a time machine. Secondly, the branch timeline he created would have been pruned by the TVA, killing Cap long before he could grow old. He'd be as dead as Star Wars. And no, they couldn't have just waited for Cap to go back to the main timeline before pruning that branched one. Loki establishes that branches must be pruned fairly quickly after they're made. Otherwise, bad shit happens or whatever. Although the show's not at all consistent about that, or any of the rules it establishes. That's not even mentioning things like incursions, or time sliding, or any of that other shit that contradicts itself. So, Rather than clarify things, Loki just makes it much more complicated. Basically, none of this makes sense. All of it's bullshit.
Endgame
It's a bunch of bullshit.
There is no clean answer. The scene should not be possible, and is broken beyond repair, at least on a technical level. In terms of character and storytelling, it's also broken. But that's a topic for another video. Thanks for watching. What do you think? Can you make sense of this scene? Please like and subscribe for more videos in the same vein. I've got a video on the blip if you're interested in more Endgame related content. I'll see you on the orbit.